Hello, my name's Gavin, and this is Genre Books. And if you want the dictionary definition of imposter syndrome, it's this video. A British man who knows next to nothing about baseball releasing a video about some baseball novels in the week of American independence celebration. I say next to nothing. I have seen a baseball match. I saw the Oklahoma City whatever they are play someone back in 2001. It's very nice, had an executive box. Didn't understand what was going on. No one could really explain it to me. But it was a fun day. If you had asked me a week ago how many baseball novels have I read, the answer would be 0. This week it's a whopping great 3. I'm not going to be describing the ins and outs of various baseball strategies here. The books that I read, and I think a lot of baseball as it appears in American literature, seems to be a very extended metaphor. I've come across baseball in books before. There is a baseball scene in A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. There's a memorable baseball scene at the beginning of Underworld by Don DeLillo. Baseball appears infrequently and tangentially in quite a few Paul Auster novels, and it's come up in Philip Roth, Thomas Wolfe. But there is a baseball novel that I've always wanted to read for pretty much as long as I can remember, but I've never got round to it until now, and that is The Natural by Bernard Malamud. The other baseball novels I've read this week have been Frank Merriwell's Diamond Foes by Bert L. Standish and The Shortstop by Zane Grey. These 3 books are pitched, if you excuse the pun, at 3 different ages of reader, and it's ascending age of intended audience. I'm going to tackle them rather than sequentially, because I think the first amongst these to have been written would have been The Shortstop by Zane Grey. But Frank Merriwell's Diamond Foes is one of the later installments in the Frank Merriwell series. I did a separate video last week on Frank Merriwell for Summer of Sport, so I will link that at the end of this one. But by this stage in the Frank Merriwell series, we're no longer talking about Frank Merriwell, we are talking about Frank Merriwell Jr. And I have to say, to all intents and purposes, you may as well forget that, because other than the fact that Frank Merriwell Sr. does make an appearance in this book, Frank Merriwell Jr. is almost a carbon copy of his father. I don't think he has the wide range of athletic prowess that his father enjoyed, but his strength certainly seems to be for baseball. He also is someone who does have to contend in the book with the reputation of his father. Not that he can't meet the expectations in an actual baseball game, but that everyone obviously expects him to do well, and his detractors think that he is only in a position to do well because of the good name of his father. But there he is, with the same name, at the same school, playing the same sports, with the same kind of stakes that his father would have played against. And the challenge is playing the clean, pure game when all around people are indulging in cheating, sharp practice, betting, and undermining the spirit of baseball. One of the many traits that Frank shares with his father is that he's not going to back down from a challenge, he's not going to back down in the face of bullies. But unlike the Frank Merriwell story that I read, for the second story, Frank Merriwell's Chums, the first part of this book takes place outside of the school. It deals with another pupil of the military academy that Frank attends, and someone whose father has just died. Someone is taking advantage of that to say that some legal papers had not been filed, a mortgage had not been paid off, and was therefore demanding payment of that mortgage in full. This boy's farm is going to be taken away from him. So in true Merriwell boy howdy spirit, Frank Merriwell Jr. contrives to solve this via the baseball field. The man who holds the mortgage on this farm is pure villain. His name is Carson. The town is Carsonville. There's definite vibes of It's a Wonderful Life here with Potter and Pottersville. Carson's son is a preening, underhand, spiteful bully who unfortunately can play baseball quite well. But Carson Sr., as part of his vanity and control over the community, runs or owns the local baseball team, and whilst they don't have ringers, they do have people who've been brought in to work for Carson at the various businesses around town who just happen to be exceptional baseball players. So the local baseball team punches above its weight in the leagues. Frank Merriwell pitches a scratch team from rejects around the town in order to challenge this team. Obviously, you know what the result is going to be. Somehow they pull this off. But what I think this book does, and what I think a lot of the Merriwell books do, from the ones that I have read and the ones I have read about, is that sport is that great leveller. There are people from different backgrounds here who otherwise would be at completely different stratas of the social system, but all on the same level field. There is, as you would expect, not a huge grey area in the moral positions which are being presented in this book. The villains are out and out rotters and are taught a lesson. The virtuous characters are inexplicably victorious, but you always know that's going to be the case. Not that I'm afraid of giving a spoiler away for, a 115-year-old book, but if you've got beyond the first 20 pages of this and don't think you know which way this book is headed, then you need to read those 20 pages again. The shortstop by Zane Grey is aimed at a slightly older audience, but still, I would say, a juvenile audience. It's an important book for Zane Grey personally. At this point, Grey has written 3 novels which have not been particularly successful, and he switches to writing a baseball novel, and one aimed at a younger audience, purely as a means of attracting economic success. Obviously, he says what he wants to do is write a book about the great American game for boys and girls of all ages, but what he wants is a success that allows him to continue to write books. And with the shortstop, he gets this success. The theme of the book is about our main character, Chase Alloway, who, through dogged perseverance, achieves success in his field. And that is an echo of Grey's own experience in writing the book, although Grey is, at this point, 2 decades older than the character in the book and already has a career as a dentist. But what Grey also has is an intimate understanding of baseball. He was a talented amateur and semi-pro player. His brother, Roma Grey, Reddy, as his nickname was an even more talented baseball player, and even, I think in 1903, had a brief spell with the Pittsburgh Pirates. There is an incident fairly early on in the book where Chase Alloway has been picked on spec to fill in a gap because a local team's pitcher has become unavailable. He can pitch. He pitches for them when this visiting team is playing against the team of the town that he has ended up in. He's mistaken because of his success in that game. He's mistakenly identified as a ringer, and there is essentially a lynching party out to get him, and they chase him out of town, giving him the nickname Chase All the Way. And this particular incident is apparently something that happened to Gray. I think this has been fictionalized to some extent, but being mistaken for being a professional in what is essentially an amateur game and incurring the wrath of the local townspeople. This book is in a similar vein to Frank Merriwell's Diamond Foes, but it is much more of a realistic, in certain ways, environment. Whilst baseball players may be lauded by the local communities and wider communities for their heroic exploits on the field, amongst themselves there is ill feeling, pranks and hijinks that maybe get a little bit too carried away, harsh words, fist fights. Players can be substance abusers, they have violent tempers, they're inordinately suspicious and superstitious. They all live in mortal fear of an injury curtailing or ending their career. They're not especially well paid. There is no financial security to fall back on, and there is only the prospect of a short career which will end one day in them being set aside. But this book also has another side, and it is very much a rags to riches story. Chase, at the age of 12, after the death of his father, becomes a de facto man of the household and quits school and goes to work in a factory. 5 years later, at the age of 17, he realises he is getting nowhere. He is not earning enough to support his mother and his crippled brother, who has aspirations to go to college. Chase's own aspirations of college are by this point gone. But what Chase can do, and what he has proven at the firm, is that he can play baseball. But it doesn't stop him trying to do the easy thing first. He asks for a raise. Having worked there for 5 years, you would imagine he'd be entitled to one, but he's denied, so he quits his job. His mother is obviously distraught at this. Not only is there going to be no income, but her eldest son has decided on the disreputable life of a baseball player. But Alloway goes out, and after his experience of being mistaken for a ringer and being run out of a town, carries with him some kind of sort of Jonah or hoodoo, where other teams experience bad luck when they pick him. He ends up being persona non grata in the wider baseball area, but suddenly gets given a lifeline through a job at shortstop for this team. He's no longer a pitcher. But the idea is that his abilities at pitching are, they are fantastic, but they will lead him to get into trouble because he has such an unusual pitching action. In construction, the book feels very much like what there is a writer in 1870s, 1880s America called Horatio Alger, who specialised in these rags to riches stories of young men overcoming the odds of their humble backgrounds to becoming great successes at whichever profession the book is about. But it is presented realistically, and the characters and the world that they inhabit are a fairly rounded world, and quite a satisfying book as a whole. This is slightly in comparison to the detriment of Frank Merriwell's Diamond Foes, which, despite its good points, is and does feel like the 232nd in a series of books. Quite a lot of Frank Merriwell Jr.'s experiences are not described within the book, but that's probably because we are so late in the series, people don't want to hear those descriptions over and again. With a rags to riches story, you know where the book is headed, and it is of its time in that regard, but it also has quite a lot of realistic portrayal of the life of sportsmen at this time. It doesn't shy away from some of the bad habits of these baseball players, even if it does couch it in reader-friendly terms. Needless to say, Chase does well by the team, does well by his teammates, does well by the town that has adopted him, and does well by the mascot of the baseball team, who is he's a handicapped child. He's a little hunchback called Mitty Maru, who he takes under his wing, possibly because he's thinking about the fact that he has a crippled brother back home, and treats Mitty more as a human than many of the other people on the team do, who treat him more as a mascot or a good luck charm. And slowly he works through Mitty Maru's defences and gets him to open up as well. The Natural by Bernard Malamud almost feels like it's initially travelling along this same track. It's going to be a rags to riches story. This player, Roy Hobbs, has been picked from obscurity, working on a farm, to try out for the major leagues. He's on his way to Chicago to be auditioned by the Cubs. But by this point, this is 1950s America. Things have fallen apart. That American dream is somewhat tarnished by real experiences. The agent who has discovered Roy meets up with a journalist and a famous baseball player on the verge of retirement on the train that they are travelling on the way to Chicago. The baseball player doesn't want to know anything about them. He doesn't care. He dismisses Roy out of hand, but he's trying to impress a woman who's got on the train. The woman is very much taken with the baseball player, but incites a little playoff, and when the train stops at a local town, they go around a fairground. There is like a coconut shy where both players are pitching and winning lots of prizes, and she engineers a contest between the two of them, and as a literal sideshow to the funfair, we have Roy pitching against one of the greatest hitters in the league, the Whammer, as his nickname is, and he beats him and humbles him, and the woman, Harriet Bird, switches her allegiance from the Whammer to Roy. But this is very much a poisoned pill, because it turns out this woman is essentially a psychopath. She was intending to kill the Whammer, as she had killed a couple of sportsmen in recent days across the country, targeting successful sports people and shooting them. She now switches to Roy and does shoot him. This is all in the first 50 pages of the book, and we find Roy, who is, he's an innocent and he's a victim, and his American dream is all but snuffed out there and then as a 20-year-old man on his way through his first tryout at a major team. We then fast forward 15 years, and Roy has never given up on that dream. He's given up on pitching. He was an all-round amazing player, but he's now concentrating on his batting. And he has two things going for him. He has his tenacity and perseverance, He really, really wants the recognition he feels he is due as a great baseball player. And he's also got the tool by which he's going to achieve this, which is a baseball bat called Wonder Boy, which he made by himself out of some very special wood. And this goes with him everywhere. This is his talisman. This is the weapon with which he fights. If you're talking about the American dream, if you're talking about the Declaration of Independence, this is the pursuit part of the pursuit of happiness. Roy is absolutely driven, and in some ways becomes much less of a likeable character because of this. He wants greatness, but when this becomes unobtainable for him, he settles for riches. Like Chase Alloway, he's been brought up in poverty. Unlike him, he's also been brought up with some abuse in his upbringing. He is another person who has escaped at a young age in order to pursue this dream, and using baseball as a conduit to achieve this. In the team he joins, the New York Knights, there is exploitation, there is the violence, there is the harsh words. Roy again is a victim. This time he's a victim of pranks from the more established members of the baseball team, so destroying his uniform when he is being paid such a low wage he can't afford to replace it. There is a lot going on in this novel, but the baseball is a combination of allegorical and mythological. It's allegorical because it success in the game is seen as the culmination of that American dream, but in substituting the honest hard work to achieve it for easy get-outs is the undoing of more than one character in the book. Mythological because I think there is, oddly enough, there is an Arthurian viewpoint you can take of this book. Roy is innocent farm boy Arthur. Wonder Boy is Excalibur. The team he has joined are called the Knights. I mean, in some ways it's staring you in the face, but he has his natural ability is some kind of superpower he has when he's wielding Wonder Boy. The Holy Grail they're all working towards is winning that championship, winning that pennant. But what it does show is the difficulty in trying to achieve something that is pure and wonderful in a world which is so dark and venal and grubbing. And the world of baseball is all of these things. The world of baseball as it's presented in these books, I hasten to add, I'm sure it's all wonderful and above board now. But what these books have in common is that they all have a central talented figure. This is the hero, this is the sports hero. All of them show how fragile that teamwork and camaraderie of a baseball team is. When things are going well, it's brilliant. As soon as things are going badly, everyone is looking to blame each other, looking to blame circumstances, looking to rely on superstition. The strength of these central characters is tested by how they can rise above it. All three of them actually do show, and even the Merriwell, which is surprising, show a murky world surrounding the game, mostly with sort of betting being very much frowned upon. And even when betting is okay, trying to game those results is obviously a bad thing. The fixing element of games is prevalent in all three of the books, but only two of our central characters in the books are able to resist it. But there's also something that the books have in common which isn't great. Minorities are nowhere to be seen. I guess this is probably true to life for baseball as it was played in the first half of the 20th century. And the women characters, if they appear at all, are very much two-dimensional. In Frank Merriwell, I think the only female character is the mother of one of the boys, and she may as well have just been a microwave oven for all the agency her character has, unfortunately. In the short stop, the woman that Chase falls for is a Petrarchan ideal. I'm not sure there's a huge amount of roundedness to Mary's character. In the natural, there are more women characters. There are more, I suppose, more interesting women characters. There's a definite noir femme fatale feeling around Memo Paris, who is the baseball manager's niece, who may herself be a bad luck charm, and she is playing her own game throughout the book. You also have Iris Lemon, who is much more of a motherly, nurturing figure, which at the one and the same time attracts and repels Roy. But there are differences between the books as well, or themes where only two of the books address it. Both Frank Merriwell's Diamond Foes and the short stop lead to societal change. In Diamond Foes, the antagonist, the fixer of the games, the evil guy who runs Carsonville, is humbled, and he is, whilst not made penniless, he is certainly hurt significantly financially. His son endures even more punishment. In the short stop, it addresses the issue that was prevalent at the time of there being no games on a Sunday. All of a sudden the teams start to play games on a Sunday. This is, to begin with, in order to make some money for the team on behalf of the owners. The team players aren't sure about it at all. Many of them don't want to do it, and Chase ends up getting arrested as being a named player who is playing on a Sunday. But he, whilst he has struggled with the decision himself to play on a Sunday, expresses it so eloquently in a courtroom scene that it is actually decided in the community that we're not going to allow Sunday playing, but we're also not going to allow people to work a full day on a Saturday. You now get Saturday afternoons off, so everyone benefits, and they still get to go watch their baseball. There are other differences. In Diamond Foes, it's all about the clean living. You can tell who the bad guys are because they smoke cigarettes. In the short stop, and certainly in the natural, clean living is out of the window. Even someone who has that natural ability and is our hero, like Roy Hobbs, is, given to smoking, given to gambling, and as he is falling into the abyss of poor decisions, also given to massive overconsumption of food. There's also differences in the privilege of these characters. Frank Merriwell Jr. is a scion of a famous family. He didn't even have the poverty that was hanging over Frank Merriwell Sr. Frank Merriwell Sr. relies upon a wealthy uncle and keeping him sweet. He is an orphan. This isn't obviously the case with Junior, the chip off the old block. But for both Chase and Roy, it's been a hard upbringing. Backgrounds of poverty and abuse, with baseball seen as the way to escape this. All about baseball, these books, but treating it very differently. One as an exemplar of how life should be lived and how the game should be played, and for the other two, using that game as that step up to fulfill a dream which is slightly more nebulous. So happy 4th of July to those in the States who celebrate, and hopefully a happy 4th of July for us as well this year. Until then.